Hi everyone, welcome to this week. We are going to learn some new tenses this week and shift principal parts. So we're going to learn the perfect active tenses. All right, and we'll take a look at tenses that we already know. Okay, that's lovely. So I have this fancy slide in PowerPoint that seems not to have translated into the program I use to make the classes. All right, and then we'll move on. I say there, I apologize. And as I said, it looked great in PowerPoint. It just didn't translate into this program. Basically, you have four principal parts, right? So you have the first principal part, the second principal part, the third principal part, and the fourth principal part, right? And we can sort of draw a line right down the middle. So the first and second, as we've learned, deal with the present, the imperfect, and the future. And these are sort of combined because the first is kind of an outgrowth of the second, i.e. the first is a form that is made with the second. And as we know, when you're forming the present, imperfect, and future, you use the present stem, which is the second principal part minus the RE. You add a characteristic vowel, sometimes a tense sign like the BA for imperfect, and then the personal endings. All right. So on the left side of that line, first and second principal parts, we deal with those three tenses. All right. On the right side of this line, all right. So on the one hand, yes, for third and fourth principal parts, we're going to be dealing also with three tenses: the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. Okay, but there's going to be a little subdivision or mini division between third and fourth, in that third principal part is going to be only the active forms, fourth principal part is going to be only the passive forms. So in other words, this week we're only going to be dealing with the third principal part. The fourth principal part, I believe, is next week when we learn the passive forms. Okay, so in other words, when you're thinking about principal parts, all right, when you're dealing with the perfect tenses, and we do refer to all three of them as the perfect tenses, even though one of the perfect tenses is the perfect tense, you're dealing with either the third or the fourth principal part. And if you're dealing with the active forms, it's the third, and the passive forms, it's the fourth. And again, this week, we're only going to be learning the active. All right. So here's what, again, I apologize for the messed up slide there. Just to review, this is the present, right? We talked about it a little bit, but the present stem, and you can see some of that here, right? Present stem, and then we've got the three tenses here, and then, of course, the endings are over here, all right? So shifting to the perfect. Essentially, now we're dealing with what's called the perfect stem, okay? And the perfect stem takes the third principal part, which in this case is dokui, and it gets rid of that I. So in other words, the perfect stem, equals third principal part minus the I. Now the good news is every third principal part ends in an I, even irregular verbs. Now, a lot of times you'll have some stem changes from second to third principal parts. That is sort of the irregularity. But all third principal parts will end in an I, okay? And so you take that perfect stem, again, third principal part minus that I, and you add whatever endings you need to that. So for instance, for the perfect, wrong color. For the perfect, you have the endings here. So E is the it, imus istis erunt, all right? Most of them use that I, and then erunt is sort of the outlier, that third person plural. And then over here, you can see, of course, a verb conjugated in the perfect tense. All right. So again, portawi is that third principal part. We take off the I, and we add the ending. So portawi, portawisti, portawit, portawimus, portawistis, portawerunt. All right. And then, of course, you've got all your other verbs done here. And since it's very regular, since it all works the same, they don't each get their own grid. And that includes irregulars. All right. The important part about the perfect two is that it is translated, all right, with that ED form of the verb. That's the most common translation. So look in the present, right? I look right now. Looked in the perfect, right? I looked yesterday. You can also translate the perfect as did verb or have or has verbed. So these are the three translations for the perfect. So looked, did look, or have or has looked, depending, of course, on who the subject is. Remember that the imperfect is that was verbing or were verbing, kept on verbing, things like that. Perfect does not mean perfect in the sense that we use it. Perfect comes from the Latin, as you can imagine, and it simply means completed. Excuse me. So a perfect action is one that is completed. An imperfect action is one that is incomplete or not completed. And that's where that was or were verbing. Generally, we don't think of it as not complete, but rather continuous. Continuous sort of implying it not complete. So for the perfect, the translation is ed verbed, did verb, or have or has verbed. All right. So here's the pluperfect. Again, formation is exactly the same. Okay, so perfect tense, and then we're adding the endings. Now, the endings for the pluperfect are the imperfect of sum. And so if you look up here, aram, aras, arat, aramas, aratus, arat. You just have to be careful about the overlap confusion here, so that if aram, aras, arat is used by itself, it is the imperfect of sum. If it is used as an ending, it is part of a pluperfect form. So again, portawi is the third principal part, portaweram, portaweras, portawerat, etc. The pluperfect, over here on the left, this is the perfect. I apologize, the pages are a little staggered. So the pluperfect info is going to come on the next slide. I'm going to put an arrow just so that we're clear about that. The pluperfect is translated had verbed, and that is it. It is not uncommon for students to sort of mix up the H helping verb, so have or has versus had. Have or has is always the perfect. Had is always the pluperfect. All right, and you just have to sort of do whatever you need to do to keep those straight. So the pluperfect is always had, the perfect is always have or has, and again, all your verbs are done here, but they are going to be completely regular in that all verbs will use the same formation, perfect stem, third principal part minus the I, plus aram, aras, arat, aramas, aratat. All right, and again, here's your info on the pluperfect. So had verbed is the translation. All right, and finally, the future perfect, similar to the pluperfect, the future perfect uses the future of some, with one exception, for its endings. All right, and again, you can see aro, aris, arit, arimus, aritus, and then here's the exception, which is erint. So normally it would be erunt for the future of some, but because we've used erunt for the perfect third person plural, erint is going to be used here for the future perfect. And part of that is that the future perfect is not commonly used. It is by far the least common of all the tenses. All right, and the way the future perfect is translated is will have verbed. And what the future perfect does is it indicates a future action, right? There's the future part, before another future action. And that's the future, or the perfect part, excuse me. So in other words, by the test tomorrow, I will have studied for 3 hours. So the test is the future, right? The simple future. The future perfect is what you're going to do in between right now and the test tomorrow. So you will have studied for 3 hours, and that's the future perfect. And again, it might sound familiar. It's not unheard of, but it is also by far the least common of all the tenses. All right, so formation is the same. Perfect stem, third principal part minus the I, plus those future forms of the verb to be. Aro, aris, arit, arimus, aritus, erint, with that one exception being erint. And again, all the verbs are done out. All right, so here is the perfect tense in action, and I like this one because it gives you both the present and the perfect in the same one. So the verb here is cresco, crescere. Oh, there we go. And its third principal part is crewi, as you can deduce. It means to increase. We get words like crescendo from it, even words like increase. But crescendo might be the coolest and the most obvious, or at least the most closely related derivative. Anyway, so crescit, right? This is our present form, and you can see that it uses the first/second principal part, and then crewit, of course, is our perfect form, and you can see that it uses the third principal part. All right, and so what this ends up meaning, right? And you can see it down here. love of money grows, all right, with its accumulation. So it'd be a little more literal. All right, so love of money grows. There's my present tense for grow or increase, right? Love of money increases. All right, excuse me. As much as quantum, the money itself has increased. Okay, so in other words, the more money you make, and I'm being very liberal here, the more money you make, the more you like. Sorry about that. I think I stopped recording momentarily. So from a literal standpoint, love of money grows present as much as money itself has grown. All right, and so there is your distinction between the present and the perfect. All right, so here's a little exercise. So all you're doing is identifying here whether verbs in English are the perfect or the imperfect. And again, remember that imperfect is going to be that was verbing, all right, kept on verbing, usually characterized by the ing. The perfect will be the verbed, did verb, or have or has verb. So was running, number one, with that was running, that's going to be the imperfect. Number two, has ground. Again, with that has, it's going to be the perfect. And I'll let you go through and do the other three. All right. All right, so now you're completing forms. So you, of course, get the subject from over here, right? That'll tell you what ending to use. And then you're given the stem, and you just need to put on the correct ending. Now, these are all perfect or imperfect. They're not all going to be perfect, but again, distinguishing between perfect and imperfect. So we have walked. You can see that ambulao, that's a little awkward to say. That's that third principal part / perfect stem. So ambulavimus, because of the we subject. They were hurrying is the imperfect, were hurrying. Festina is the present stem, the second principal part. So festinabant. Okay? All right, and I'll leave the rest for you. Again, make sure to identify whether you're dealing with the perfect or the imperfect before figuring out how to complete it. All right, now we're choosing the correct translation for verbs at left. Now you've got a whole variety of verbs. So wowerunt is going to be the perfect with that erunt. Rapuwerant is going to be the pluperfect with that erant. Now remember, we talked about this. Eramus by itself, right, is going to be the imperfect of the verb to be. All right, so watch out for your different forms as you're going through here. So wowerunt, they rolled, looks good, but let's make sure they were rolling imperfect. They had rolled pluperfect. So indeed, it is that one. So rapuwerant, they seized perfect. They were seizing imperfect. They had seized. There's my had for pluperfect. All right, correct. And again, Eramus is imperfect. So we were looks good, but let's check. We are present. We had been pluperfect. So we were is going to be correct. And remember, Eramus by itself is the imperfect. It's only when it's used as an ending that it functions as a pluperfect. And I'll leave the rest to you. All right, let's look at the summatives this week. All right, so we're identifying the verbs by person, number, and tense, and then translating. All right, so again, obviously a lot of these are going to be the new verb forms, but just make sure, all right, you want to make sure that you're not missing any sort of imperfects or other forms slipped in there. So misi, all right, and by the way, you're going to have to look up these verbs. In terms of principal parts, a verb like misi comes from mito, mitera. So if you look up mis, you might not find it. If you don't find anything under MIS, move back a letter. So instead of looking up MIS, look up MI, right? You'll have to scan through the MI verbs, but you'll eventually find mito, and you'll see that its third principal part is misi. All right, so the I tells me that it's first person, singular, and that it is perfect, and so that's going to be I sent. And I won't write down for the person, number, and tense, but I will say them. All right, let's move down to yaktawerant. Actually, let's do finiweramus, just to shake it up a little bit. So finio, finire, finiwi. All right. And that eramus is going to be a pluperfect, right? That's my imperfect verb to be used as an ending. So we had finished. All right. And there's that had of the pluperfect. So first person plural, eramus, pluperfect. All right. And I will leave the rest to you. All right, now we're just translating these verbs into Latin. Same thing, make sure to identify the tense. So in other words, I wrote simple past, that's going to be my perfect. I had written, that's going to be my pluperfect because of the had. They will have judge. That's going to be my future perfect, excuse me. All right, but watch out for number 5. You will teach. That's going to be my simple future, right? The one from the first and second principal part. So just be careful of things like that. So I wrote comes from scribo, scribere. Scripsi is the third principal part. And so since it's I wrote, it's just going to be scripsi. That's my first person singular ending. I had written, same verb, same stem. So sorry, I messed that one up. Scripseram. All right, and again, that's my first person pluperfect ending. All right, now we'll leave the rest to you. All right, that'll do it for this week. Please be in touch if you have any questions via email, and I will be here next week. Thanks.